were, I don't know what tense it's supposed to be, the supervising animators of a movie called Soul, which is going to be coming out this November, fingers crossed, hopefully, which we hope you all see.
Yes.
And I started working on Pixar. I'm a little older. When I started working on Pixar, I had a head full of hair, and started on that movie back there, A Bug's Life. Worked on Toy Story 2 and the first Monsters Inc., Incredibles, and Cars, and a whole bunch of films in between. So first off, we just want to say how excited we are to be able to talk to you all today. I mean, this is definitely one of those things that is a benefit of us all kind of being sheltered in place, because we're used to doing this and we're able to all jump online and we're able to see your faces, you can see ours, and do this talk. So we put together this talk. It's kind of it's an introduction to animation talk. And I know we've got people on this call that some have more experience, some have less experience, but we're gonna talk through it. We're gonna talk through some animation, and hopefully there's some stuff that you all learned from this. And if you have questions, I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I believe, go ahead and put them in the chat. I'm going to be stepping through the talk mostly. Jude's going to be watching the chat, and we'll chime in and we'll answer questions as we go. Anything else, or should we get started?
Let's get started. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to share my screen. So let's do this. I'm going to hit share. And I'm going to hit play. All right, so does everybody, I need some hands up. If you can see my screen, it should say character animation. Every story starts somewhere. All right, okay. So you heard a little bit about us. And this class is really, this lecture is really about an introduction to animation. All right, we're going to show some examples of different animation that's out there in the world. But we're going to focus on one thing. We're going to focus on something called the principles of animation and how that works for what we do, which is character animation. So like we said, please go ahead, type those questions in as we go. Even if you are asking the same question, that's fine. We'll watch it, and we'll take some pauses, and we'll answer this question as we go. All right. So are you good? You saw the next slide there? It says, what is animation? Great. So let's start with this. I mean, it's kind of the most basic question for animation. And if you were to look in the dictionary, the definition of the word animate is to give life. It's not to move, it's not to draw, it's not to render something on the screen, it's to give life. Now, we're fans of Disney animation, and that goes back a long time. And so our guess would be that these two guys from many years ago, their names are Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston. They were a couple of what was dubbed the Disney's 9 Old Men. They're some longtime animators who've both passed on from now. But they wrote this seminal book called Disney's Animation, The Illusion of Life. And they named it The Illusion of Life because that's really what we're doing in animation. We're trying to make something feel like it's alive. Now, as an aside, I just want to say there are lots of books out there on animation. You know, take a look and see whatever makes sense to you. It could be books, it could be videos, it could be YouTubes, it could be schools, or it could be talks like this. So speaking of talks, let's get back to it. Okay, so what does animation mean practically? All right, it's a wide-ranging field. It encompasses everything from the long history of Disney animation. This is Steamboat Willie, Mickey Mouse, the first talking cartoon from back in 1928. Not the first Mickey Mouse cartoon, by the way. It's actually, I believe, the second Mickey Mouse cartoon for the geeks watching along, but is the first talking cartoon, and it did change animation. So there's from this to the world of live action effects in movies, like this is all full of animation. What you're watching, this is a lot of animation. You wouldn't know this normally. It looks like it's all live action, but there's a lot of animation in there. You see animation in commercials. You see an animation in television, and you see animation in apps. I mean, the point is this. There are countless opportunities in the world of animation. If you love it, there's a spot. That's the thing. And of course, there's the character animation that we create here at Pixar. Now, we've made a number of films at Pixar over the years. Jude and I talked a little bit about some of the films we've worked on, and it's showcasing characters and worlds that we hope resonate with people all over the world. But it's one thing to look at these films as a fan and you get sucked into the story and you just love watching it. But you're more than fans here, you're students. Like, this is what you want to do, right? This is what you're interested in. And if you're an inspiring animator wanting to create animation like this one day, the animation up on the screen can be super inspiring, right? I've made this face before. Who hasn't made this face before? But when you look at it, sometimes it can also feel a little overwhelming. I've also made this face before with less hair. Now, let's put it this way. Pretend you're dropped into an area where you don't know the language. And if you were just starting to learn a language like French or Spanish or Japanese or whatever, everyone would probably be speaking too fast, with too much nuance, too much complexity. You might pick up a word or a phrase here or there, but it can feel overwhelming. Now, to watch some of our animation, watch fully polished, complex animation can feel like this. It's beautiful, it's entertaining, it's well crafted, but it can be so much information coming at you so fast. To break it down and understand how it's built can be too much. All right? But just like learning a new language, where you start off simply with the building blocks, learning animation is no different. And that's what we're going to kind of dive into today. Jude, how are we doing? Should we pause? Do questions or anything?
We've got lots of questions, Bobby.
Got lots of questions. Should we take like a second, pick off a couple? What do you think?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Cambria asks, how do I make my animation look cushioned and smooth instead of stiff?
Ooh, we're gonna get to some of that.
Yeah.
That's a great question. Let's put a pin in that one. Let's come back to that and see if we can answer that question. I like it.
Naomi asks, what movie was your favorite to work on?
Ooh, all right. You want to go? What's your favorite movie to work on?
I had a really good time working on Inside Out because I loved the voice artists that they chose to voice the characters, and each one of those mind characters was so different in terms of their personalities, obviously, but also the way that we could animate them. So, you had Joy, who was bouncy and fun, and Zippy, and Sadness was very slow and hunched over. And it was that contrast between the characters and the design and the voices. It just made it such a fun show to work on.
That's it's hard to argue with Inside Out. Yeah, my favorite film to work on, I think, might have been Toy Story 3. I love that film, and getting to work on that and kind of see that arc of a story wrap up that started 15 years earlier with the first Toy Story and get to the end with those toys being handed off by Andy was pretty inspiring. So, all right, should we keep going?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
We'll come back.
We'll keep coming back. All right, because there's a question that is out there. I mean, we're talking about animators and wanting to be an animator, but the question is, how do you get from here to there? It can seem like a long road, watching what you see up on the screen to making what you see up on the screen. And all of you, please remember, Jude and I, we were you. We were students. We were sitting here just trying to find information out about how we can do this. And that's the thing, like, every journey needs to start somewhere. And this is about you changing your identity from someone who wants to be an animator to someone who is an animator. All right? Now, all animation starts with principles. This is going to go to that first question. These are the building blocks, the tools of the trade, so to speak, that you'll use to craft your performance, right? Principles are not a performance. They're tools to use. That's important to remember. And you can find a list of animation principles all over the place in books, on the internet, in the animation classes. For this example, we can go back to this book from earlier, The Illusion of Life. Now, this book was written years ago. I think it came out in the early 1980s, long before computer animation was a mainstream way of animating, and yet the principles still hold true. Now, some of you might have noticed something like this, because in every animation class, internship, or job you'll have, there's a good chance the first thing you'll have to animate is a bouncing ball. You're gonna have to do that. If you haven't done it yet, you will do it. And guess what? You're gonna do it again and again and again. Now, at Pixar, our bouncing balls start with tests, test shots, and really it starts with something called a lifesaver hole, and not a candy like this, actually a digital lifesaver hole. And we do this because back in the 1990s, way back in the 1990s, when Pixar was making commercials, which we made before movies, the studio made a series of commercials featuring lifesaver holes as characters. Now, ever since then, we've used these lifesaver hole computer models as our bouncing balls for our animation tests. It's the first thing our animators animate when they get to the studio. These are some of the tests some of our animators have done at Pixar. Now, with that, let's start looking at some of those animation principles, right? These are the building blocks of everything you're going to do when you're an animator. First up, let's talk about something called arcs, all right? Now, almost everything moves in the natural world on an arc. Here's an example from someone named Muybridge, who took these photographs, famous photographic studies of movement. And if you track the front right hoof of the horse, hoof, 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 something in there, you can see it doesn't really even move in a straight line. It has an arc to it as it lifts off the ground and prepares to plant again. Now, a bouncing ball is no different. Now, looking at the three examples of these poses of a ball, one on the ground, one in the air, and then on the ground again, you'll notice how it moves forward through space on an arc, right? That's how this works. Now, if the ball didn't move on an arc, it would look like a classic video game, Pong. I don't know if anyone played this. I used to. Great game, no arcs. All right, so arcs. So here's what you need to remember. Arcs, remember, we're talking about arcs, like that rainbow, not arcs, like the boat. Okay, there we go. Let's do one more of these, and then we'll stop for some questions. The second principle of animation, squash and stretch. Now this is key. I mean, this is one that's like really, people talk about this all the time. Squash and stretch happens all around us. Even things you think are really solid has some squash and stretch. I mean, look at this. This is a golf ball. This is a golf ball, but it still has some squash and stretch in it. Slow it down. Ready? Squashes before it gets hit. That thing seems hard. You've all picked up a golf ball, you hear it bounce, but it all has squash and stretch to it. So one of the ways to have something feel like a material is to utilize squash and stretch. So you've got a squash part and you've got a stretch part. So in our previous example, and we're going to come back and forth to this a lot, this bouncing ball. If the ball is, let's say this ball's in the middle of a bounce, right? That means it wouldn't be round when it hits the bottom, it would be squashed. And then when the ball bounces up into the air, at the highest point, at the top of the arc, it'd probably look round then, right? And then in between the top and the bottom of the ball, it would stretch in there. But remember what we said about arcs, it would stretch along the arc, then squash when it hits the ground again. Okay, so we're already starting to combine some things here. That's right. Combining principles of animation, mind blown. But wait, there's more. We can go on to timing and spacing. Should we pause and answer another question or two?
Yes, let's do that. So Cambria says she has the Animator Survival Kit. Good choice. That's a good book. London asked, I'm trying to make an animation YouTube channel. What should I use with a Wacom Intuos Pro paper edition?
Well, I mean, I think if you want to make a YouTube channel, really, you just want to find whatever works for you to animate. I've seen people show animation with software. I've seen people show animation with flipbooks. There was a really great, did you see the one, Jude? Pete Docter, who directed Inside Out and Monsters, Inc. and Soul that's coming out, he did a flip book that was posted online where he was in his closet recording this. And he was showing how he was doing a flip book using index cards and a binder clip. This guy's made some of the most famous movies around the world, and he still makes flip books using index cards and a binder clip and put that online, and it works. So there's lots of opportunities.
Yes. Also plasticine, you know, model making, you know, you could do a stop motion. Or even just things, household things around your house. You could create a story in the way that like toys come to life.
Legos.
Legos. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Okay. Jada asked, how long did it take to make Incredibles 2?
Well, I don't know. What do you think? I mean, these movies take what, 3 or 4 years usually to make at least.
From the very, very beginning of the first idea to when it actually is finished, it could be 4 or 5 years. And Incredibles 2, I think the animation, I think we might have started and finished the bulk of it in a year. So,
Yeah.
and there was a lot of people working on that film, a lot of animators. So it was 100, how many minutes? 100 and something minutes. So
Yeah.
a year is quite a long time, but there's a lot of people working on it. But it's a very slow process animation, which is why it doesn't seem. It seems like it's too long of a time.
Yeah.
And then Melanie asked, "What movie was the most challenging to work on?"
Movie was the most challenging. I mean, to go back a little ways, I remember the first Incredibles was incredibly, no pun intended, challenging to do. It was the first movie with so many humans and special effects and cities full of people, and the characters were stretching and running fast and doing all sorts of stuff. And it was just very, very, it was a big challenge, but people were so excited about the story, they were up for it.
Yeah, that helps if you're doing something you love, and technical challenges or anything like that doesn't seem like such a big problem if you're having fun while you're doing it, right?
Yep. Then that whole sense of time and space kind of disappears, which leads us in to timing and spacing. So here we go. There's my awkward dad joke segue. It's what I do all day long. So this is the next principle of animation. It's called timing and spacing. And this one, to be honest, can be confusing because these two principles are related and oftentimes are lumped together. I mean, I have made this face more times than I can count when thinking about timing and spacing. So let's look at the first thing. Let's look at timing first. All right, so pay attention here. This one's, don't blink. So we've got our 4 drawings from earlier. 1, 2, 3, 4. Actually, it's 5 drawings. See, I can't even count. We got our 5 drawings from earlier. Now, let's say we want this bounce to be 2 seconds long. All right. Now, film plays back at 24 frames per second. All right. So we got to do a little math here. Animation does involve a little bit of math. And we want the highest point to be halfway in between. All right. So that would mean we'd have frame 1, we'd have the high point at frame 24, and we'd have the low point at frame 48. All right. The next thing to decide is when those 2 stretch frames are going to occur. We need to know when they're going to happen in time. So if you wanted that timing to be even, it just moves all the way through evenly, you could split the difference between the low and the high points. So the stretch frames would occur at frame 12 and frame 36. All right, so this is basic math here. We're jumping 1, 12, 24, 36, 48. Now, if you were to do something called chart this out, so if you were doing hand-drawn animation, you chart it out, it would look like this. There'd be spacing in between the timing and whatnot. And okay, hold on. Well, we'll just stop for a second. We'll time out, because what the heck is that thing I showed you, right? I mean, I don't know. And this thing is called a hand-drawn chart. It's a timing chart. So if you were to do hand-drawn animation, you would do this, and it tells you 2 things. It tells you at what frame a drawing should appear, and it shows you how close the previous and next drawings should be to those drawings. This is called timing and spacing. Now, if any of you have played with computer animation, the computer animation version of this is a spline. It's called a computer animated spline, all right? And if you turn the hand-drawn chart on its side, it kind of looks a little bit like an animation spline-ish, okay? To be honest, they're more like fraternal twins if we were trying to compare them. But they both have keyframes, meaning drawings or images that are really important, all right? So remember the frames at 1, 24, and 48, those are our low points and our high points. Those are really important things. Those are our keyframes. Wow, what happened there? I see a squiggle. Someone squiggled. And then spline handles to show how close any of the in-between images should be to those keyframes, right? So that's what those do. So again, don't worry if this seems really complicated. Like we said, timing and spacing can be confusing. It just takes practice to understand it. So back to the image of earlier. What if instead of wanting the timing to be even, 1, 12, 24, 36, 48, like we saw earlier, let's say we actually wanted to favor the top drawing, meaning to spend more time at the top of the arc and not have such even drawings or even timing. Now, in that case, you might choose to get to your stretch drawing by frame 6, stay in the higher in the arc longer until frame 42 before falling back down. Now, that chart would change. It would look like this. And if we made little tick marks along the arc for every new in-between drawing that would go in there, you can see how more drawings would be bunched up towards the top of the arc. Now, even on a chart, you can see the visual indication of spending more time near the top of the drawing at frame 24. And in a computer spline, the handles will be pulled out left and right to tell you the in-betweens to spend more time at the top of the arc, also favoring the keyframe. This is adjustments for timing and how it informs spacing. I mean, this is how timing and spacing works, which also can make your head feel like this. So let's just be honest. It's a lot to take in. But when you start to think about timing and spacing together, and this is a key part of animation, you get something truly great. And I love Reese's peanut butter cups. There you go. All right. Is that a lot? Do you want, Jude, should I keep going? What do you think?
Well, we got lots of questions, so we could do a few more.
Okay, let's do a few more.
Okay. London asked, how many panels did you use to make one movie?
Well, someone wants to do some math here. Let's say by panels, we're probably doing drawings, right? So we just said there are 24 frames in a second, right? So 24 images in a second times 60 seconds in a minute. So we're at 1,440 times 90 minutes would equal 129,600 frames to get through a 90-minute movie. Now, if let's say there's an average of 2.5 characters in each shot, then that means we can potentially have 324,000 frames at least of characters in there, which is why animation takes so long. And then there's backgrounds and story and everything else you need to do.
Yep, lots of frames. And that doesn't even include the storyboards that are drawn before we make the movie.
True.
Thousands of storyboards. You showed the Black Panther clip that we had some RIP Chadwick. That's very sad news from today. And London asked, how do you make the hair so realistic? That is another department. Simulation is the department that deals with
simulation.
Hair.
I would say, for everybody watching, I mean, this is the great thing about animation, right? Some people say, well, I want to do animation, but I don't draw. And that's okay. There's so many people that work in animation. They do everything from the stuff you put up on the screen, the characters moving, to the hair and to rendering. The more math that stuff works great for the computer scientists that do this work. There's lots of different opportunities in animation just to do all sorts of things.
And Cambria asked, do you have any tips for animation line art?
Animation line art, like for drawing, I guess is the question. If that's the question, I mean, the best thing you can do if you love hand-drawn animation or drawing is just to draw all the time. And that means there's going to be a lot of times someone's looking over your shoulder and they're like, that doesn't look like so-and-so, or what are you drawing? And you just kind of have to push through. Just draw all the time. Draw on napkins, draw on sketchbooks, draw anywhere you can. Draw a stick in the sand, it doesn't matter.
Layla asks, what are good animation programs? And really, it doesn't matter as long as you can figure out how to use it. It's because we often say the tools you're using aren't really what's important. It's what you're putting on the screen. So whether it is a pencil and you've drawn it, or if it's line art, or if it's a toon animation program, or if it's, for computer animation specifically, a lot of people use Maya, and Blender, and couple of others I can't think of right now. But it's really more what is on the screen rather than what tool you're using. So don't worry too much about spending lots of money on some expensive software or anything. You can do great animation with some props and a pencil or some sand.
Totally agree. All right, let's jump back into this. We're going to keep going on our principles of animation. So now the things are moving, as we just saw. We need to talk about how things start and stop. And so what we're talking about here is the idea of ease in and ease out. So unless you're doing the robot dance, most things won't start and stop on a dime, right? They ease in and they ease out. By the way, this is not a good example of someone doing the robot. Now, inversely, if things were to move all at the same rate, you might get a kind of underwater feeling, or looks like someone's doing Tai Chi, which I also think is a pretty awesome thing to do. Now, let's go back and look at this bouncing ball of ours, right? So in this example, the ball has 3 extreme poses. We've got the low, the high, and the low again. And then we've got the 2 in-betweens, the stretched out drawings on either side. And to ease in means you're going to need more frames as the ball gets closer at the top. And we might do this because gravity starts to take over, slowing the ball as it pushes against gravity and then reaching the apex of its arc. And then there would be less frames as the ball falls to the bottom and then bounces from the ground. Now, if you wanted the ball to spend even more time near the top, you would add more drawings in between the top drawing and the drawings on either side. So it's a little bit like we saw in our timing chart. We would be following that along. And if we superimpose the computer animation spline we showed earlier over this, it would show the same thing. The spline is informing the in-betweens on either side of the top of the key. It's easing in and it's easing out. So from there, we'll move on to weight. And I'm not telling you to wait. We're actually talking about the other weight. Now, as in the thing is like, is something light or is it heavy? Now, also at this point, you're going to notice there's a lot of overlap between these principles already. They don't act independently. I mean, that's the thing. Principles of animation work together, much like filmmaking, to create something whole that feels a certain way. So let's take a second here. Let's look back at one of those early lifesaver whole animation tests we showed. You know, we said what people do when they started Pixar. All right. So if we look at this test, you can see here all of these lifesaver whole models in the computer are the exact same, except for their scale, they're different sizes, right? And their color, they're different colors, but they feel like they have different weight. Now, if we watch the animation slower, and this is a great exercise to do anytime you can slow down animation, and look at the principles being applied, do you see the arcs that are happening? So look for the arcs. Do you see the spacing between the poses, how they're closer or farther apart? And look how the lifesaver holes ease in or ease out at the top of those arcs. Now, that's the thing. When the video is slowed down, you can see squash and stretch. You can feel the timing. You can see the spacing difference and how that affects weight. So making one hole seem heavier than the other, all right? So with that, you go on and talk about the last thing we're going to talk about today for animation principles, and that's materials. Now at Pixar, we talk about the idea of truth in materials a lot. And we're not talking about fashion materials like denim versus corduroy. We're talking truth to materials, which means if something looks like a certain material, it should act like a certain material. And animators can achieve this by using the principles of animation we've talked about today. But just in case we're really not clear about how materials are different, here's an example of 2 different materials. Now, to focus on just the principle of squash and stretch, this is also kind of gross looking, but it's real, right? Which is nuts. If a bowling ball and a water balloon ran into each other, think about the difference between these 2 objects, okay? One's really, really hard and doesn't squash and stretch much. One's squash and stretches a ton. And how you would use that animation principle to convey this, right? Of course, it's one thing to apply these principles to a bouncing ball, but we imagine what you really want to know is how to animate full characters, right? This is what we do all day long. And the thing is, characters don't need to be complex. In fact, you can get there with quite a bit of character animation from simple shapes. So I'm going to show you an example of not much more than a bouncing ball, which we've seen. And this is from one of those old commercials we did with those lifesaver holes. So watch this. Okay, so that's a commercial. That's basically just a bunch of bouncing balls. But if we watch it slower, we can see again how the principles of animation are being used to convey character, right? Because remember we said principles, that's not character. Those are just the ingredients you're using. Now, it looks like these lifesaver holes are having fun. They're playing with one another. They're expressing joy and so on. These characters have no faces, no arms or legs, no voices. All the acting is being shown through the principles of animation. So again, look for the squash and the stretch, look for the arcs and so on. This is how you can start to apply it. So at this point, you're starting to understand the principles. You're starting to see how you can create some character moments using these principles. So let's progress to something a little more complex than a bouncing ball. All right. So I'm talking about a character you've seen in all of our Pixar films. I'm talking about this duo, Luxo Jr., right behind Jude. So unlike the bouncing balls or lifesaver holes, Luxo Jr. doesn't squash and stretch by changing volume. They squash and stretch by what are called rotations, meaning they have spots where they will hinge or rotate in multiple directions. And these simple rotations are all the controls the animator needs to use to principles to convey character. So Luxo Jr. was a story that was told with limitations, but the story was as universal as they come. If you haven't seen the original short film, I'm going to take a couple minutes right now. I'm going to play it for you. All right, so Luxo Jr., which apparently you guys also could not hear, which I apologize for. We didn't test that one. Did you hear the lifesaver hole commercial, Jude? No, none of that's coming through. So we'll see if our sound plays in the forward ones. Hopefully the story still came across, all right? So in Luxo Junior, there were only two differences in those models, right? And luckily, there was a story told. They didn't have voices, so we didn't have to worry about that. But the only differences in them is first with scale. The two models are exactly the same except for their scale. Interesting tidbit. They both have the exact same size light bulb because in the Pixar logic, we said that was something they wouldn't be born with. That would be a thing they would get from the hardware store or whatever. Animation logic. The second difference, and the one that we notice as viewers even more than than the visual scale, is how the two characters are moving. Now, the difference in movement is conveyed only by using the principles of animation. So a bouncing ball changes shape, but Luxo Junior had to change shape with rigid rotations. So watch this clip, no sound, so don't worry, where Luxo Junior comes bouncing in. He's squashing and stretching by using rotations. So just like the bouncing ball, but this time with a rigid character. Now that squash and stretch can help craft poses that convey character. So when Luxo Junior is stretched out, they're attentive. And when they're squashed down, a sense of sadness or dejection is expressed, right? So you can see that difference just in the rotations in the poses. Timing and spacing can also convey performance. So in one moment, Luxo Junior can appear excited and happy and full of energy by using the animation principles. And at the same principles, Luxo Junior can appear sad and dejected. All right. So just to reiterate how you can use the principles of animation to tell a story, I'm going to go one further. Here's a literal example of showing the difference between weight and animation principles. This is called light and heavy. I have no idea if you're going to be able to hear sound on this. So let's see. Sound? Nope. All right. I'll narrate. He goes, light. Sound? Great.
Heavy.
All right, so that's light and heavy. Or maybe your goal is simply to have a sense of surprise. So let's see if this will play. Might have to do this. Pardon me for 1 second. We're going to come out of this, and then we're going to hit play again.
Surprise.
Right.
Multiple shorts playing. Same time.
Heavy.
All right, one more, let's see. Oh, good gracious.
Down.
Right.
Up. Down. Up. Down. Up. Down. Up. Down. Up. Down. Heavy.
All right. I'm sorry, everybody. I'm going to jump to this. Okay. So talking about the principles of animation, we just went through all of this. We explored how they can be used to convey attitudes and characters and tell stories, right? We just saw that with shorts, and we saw that with the bouncing balls. So this is the test. So the next time you go and you watch an animated film, if you can, slow it down, right? This is like the clip from earlier where it was playing really fast and it seemed complex. But if you slow it down and you watch for the principles of animation, think about the arcs, think about the squash and the stretch, the timing, spacing, the weight, the materials. Now, all of these are, well, to use ratatouille as an analogy, ingredients that are used to cook up a unique performance, okay? And as we wrap up, remember that people often use the word animator as a catch-all word. So yes, Jude and I are technically animators, and the focus of this talk was on character animation, but there's a world of artistic opportunity out there within the animation industry. So if you like animation and you want to be part of animation, there's a ton of opportunity and a ton of stuff you can do. And so if you want to learn more about this and what we do at Pixar, go to pixar.com, or there's also a thing online called Pixar in a Box, which is a series of educational tutorials. Look at that. And with that, I'll stop sharing the screen. And that's our talk. So I think we've got a ton of questions, and we've got about 10 minutes more of time.
Mm-hmm. Let's keep going. Michaela asked, what movie took the longest to work on?
Movies take the longest to work on. The longest movie I know that took the longest was from start to stop might be Up. Pete Docter started that after Monsters, Inc. in 2001, and it came out in 2009.
Okay, so about 8 years.
Yeah, that's on the long side.
Yeah, I mean, we said that most of them take 4 or 5 years. I
Yeah.
think Brave as well was another one that took 8 years, because we often start and then rewrite it and then keep going and then rewrite it again, and then, you know, and it can take 8 years. So it's a long process, but
Yeah.
that's probably the longest. Sydney asks, how do you create the vision for a character?
Jump in there.
Well, vision, by vision, do you mean the way that they look and the way that they're designed? Because, you know, at Pixar, we, as animators, we're lucky because we get given the character already designed, and the art department has figured out what they look like, and the characters department have made it for us. So we get given this rig that we get to move around. And then in our job, we're trying to figure out how to make them move and gesture, and how, you know, how to have them act. So for us, if talking about that as the vision, I think what we tend to do is do a bit of research, and we like to look at the voice actor and see how they act and what their sort of gestures and mannerisms are. And then we like to think about the story and how the character fits into the story and how they're feeling and what they're thinking, and base our animation, our poses, and our acting choices on things like that. Do you have anything to add, Bobby, or should I keep on going?
Let's keep going. I think that's good.
London, how long does it take to make a movie that is animation? What mic do you use? I don't know what mic is. But how long does it take to make a movie that is animation?
Yeah, I mean, animation takes a long time. We will say this, like it is a slow process, but if you enjoy drawing, if you enjoy creating art, if you enjoy all of this, it's just a different paced race, so to speak, right? It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So, you know, these movies, you know, we can work on a movie for a year and get about a minute's worth of work. But it's work we're really proud of, you know, in terms of animators. Yeah.
It takes a while, but it's fun. Zoe asked, is Adobe Animate a good animation program to use? I've never used Adobe Animate. I don't know if you have, Bobby.
I haven't, but again, I think going back to what Jude said earlier, whatever works for you. You don't have to get fancy programs. If you have something that works, that's great. I mean, really what you're trying to do is just find a way to practice as much as you can. So it could be on a computer, it could be some index cards, it could be some post-it notes, ideally not the corners of your textbooks, but people have done that before too. You're just trying to get a chance to practice animation.
Alana asks, any tips for anatomy in general?
Yeah, draw all you can all the time, and look at books. I mean, if you sat there in a mirror and you looked at yourself, right, you would notice that if you were drawing something, that you have an eye that actually follows the eye socket of like, if you feel like your eyebrow goes around your eye socket and your eyeball fits in there, and then you can follow the eyebrow like as it goes around the ridge of that and then comes to the top of the bridge of your nose, and before you know it, you've got a drawing, and it doesn't have to be a great drawing, but you've got a drawing of like eyes and nose and everything, just from staring at yourself in the face and just like feeling what's going on. That's the most basic thing. Draw your hands. Hands are really hard. Draw hands over and over again. So you've got, you all have an example of anatomy in yourself.
Yep. And stick figures, just as a good place to start than any. I'm not really very good at drawing, but I can draw a little stick person, and then I can put like a cylinder on to make the upper arm, and a cylinder on to make the lower arm, and sort of build it up out of shapes. That's another good way to start. Zolika asks, what is the best way to use video references? Well, I would use them as inspiration. I mean, and then sometimes what I do is I'm looking at it and I try and draw over the pose that I like. So if a character is doing something fun, I might draw over it, and then I might push it to make it a little more interesting. And then find the next pose that I like and draw over that one, and then I can flip back and forth and see what's different about the two, what's moving. And if you do that with a number of poses, and then you get rid of your reference, then you've got a character that's animated. That's one way I would use it. And it's also like looking for the little things in your reference. So if you're looking at some reference of somebody doing something, maybe they're fiddling with their hair, or they're scratching their head or something, and it's little things like that we like to put in our animation that makes our characters come to life, because it's the little things we don't even realize we're doing that makes us human, or a fish or a dinosaur. But it works if you take it from life and put it into your work. Where are we?
I see the chat here. So I heard that listening to music, Cambria says, while drawing is bad, but I find the silence makes me uneasy and I cannot concentrate. What should I do? I have never heard that, to be honest. And I listen to music all the time. Actually, one thing I've done personally since college is, and this is not for everybody, but when I'm drawing something or animating or making art, sometimes I'll put one song on repeat, that kind of on headphones, so I don't annoy everybody else, that kind of captures the spirit or the energy. So if it's like a sad drawing or whatever, I might have something that's slower. If it's something with a lot of energy, I might have something that's higher energy. But I listen to music personally all the time, and I know a lot of artists and people that do. Music's a great thing to have.
I think it's in the Richard Williams animated survival kit book that says you shouldn't listen to music, or it's harder to listen to music. And I suppose if you're doing something that requires you to like feel the flow of your animation and get the timing of your animation right, it might sort of get in the way. But whatever works for you. If you feel like you want to listen to music and it's not affecting your work, I would do it.
Yep.
Cambria asks, how should I build storyboards? I mean, do you know, you've storyboarded, Bobby?
Yeah, I've storyboarded. So, I mean, if you're going to build storyboards, to be honest, just grab a piece of paper. You can grab copy paper. You can cut it into 4s and draw storyboards like this. We didn't used to do storyboards digitally. We did it on paper. I storyboarded on Toy Story 2, and we did it all on paper. Boop, 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 and then you go around, this happens, and this happens, and this happens. It's kind of like a living comic strip, to be honest. You do not need fancy things for storyboards. It's just a planning way to tell a story. You draw them, you lay them out on your table, you walk someone in that doesn't know what the story is, and then you pitch it to them. Hey, this happens, this happens, this happens, and see if the story makes sense to them. That's all it is.
I missed one from Rhea here. What was your vision in making the animation? I think, in terms of the films that we make, the vision comes from the director. They have a story that they want to tell, and they like they kind of wrap it up in a fun world with fun characters. Like Andrew Stanton, when he made Finding Nemo, he was realizing that he was a bit overprotective of his little son, and he wanted to make a story about that, and so he ended up making Finding Nemo, which is about a fish who's also overprotective about his son, but it was something that was going on in his life that he couldn't quite understand, and he wanted to figure out why, and so he kind of learned about that by making the story using fish in the underground, in the underwater, and he was telling a story that he sort of wanted to tell, but using fish. And there's numerous examples about that in animation, so it's very important when you're trying to come up with an idea to come up with a story that you want to tell and things that you know a lot about, and that's really useful because then the story comes from you and it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, probably the easiest thing in the world, especially when you're learning, is to want to do something that you see someone else doing, right? But here's the best thing, like the best stories we've all seen, the best animation we've all seen is usually like exactly like Jude said, is the most personal. Like you all have a story to tell. You all have your lives you're living and how you see the world and how you move and how you hold yourselves and how you talk and everything. And that's what we want to see. Those are the stories that last. And the more specific the story, ironically, is often the most universal, right? Because it becomes human, like deeply human, and then everyone gets that.
Yep. So Jody asks, what movie or show was the easiest? That's I mean,
One I didn't work on. Just kidding.
which one? Oh, I would say, in answer to your question, and this is because Jody, the characters were a little bit more simple themselves, and that was Cars. Because if you think about Cars, they don't have a spine, they don't have legs. I mean, they have tires, but it's not like long arms. It's really just a head, and you had eyes, eyelids. You didn't even have brows. Well, you kind of did. So that in itself meant that you had less controls because, one of our characters could have maybe 1,000, 2,000 controls that move very tiny little pieces of the character to make them into a shape. Whereas the car was solid and it was a car and it had less controls. So that meant we could go a little bit faster.
So maybe there's one more question and then it's 10 o'clock and then we can decide if I don't know, if some people might have to go or if we want to stay on a few more minutes and do some more questions or whatnot, because I know we've got a lot. But this one says...
Can I interject, Bobby, Mr.
Yeah.
Bobby? We're good on time. If they need to log off, they can just leave. But okay. I would just love it if we can get the girls' questions answered. If you have the time, you have the time. But yeah. I scheduled the session so that we'll have enough time for open-ended questions. So if they need to leave, just log off, ladies. If not, hang on until Mr. Bobby says he can't stay on any longer.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So this says, what classes, activities do you suggest you take to help to be an animator? And I think there's a lot of options these days, right? Raise your hand if you've seen anything on YouTube ever, anything. Yeah, I better be seeing all the hands go up because I'm pretty sure all of you have seen something on YouTube, right? You could probably learn a lot just on YouTube videos, right? And then you can go from there, from books to videos to talks to classes. It does not have to be crazy town, right? So the biggest thing though to becoming an animator is that persistence, right? So there's a talk, I just heard an author say this, a writer say this, and I think it's applicable to pretty much almost anything, but let's take it for animation. He said, there's 3 things you need for success, right? You need talent, you need luck, and you need persistence. And only one of those do you get to affect, and that's persistence. You've got talent. It's like how tall or short you are. You're going to have this amount of talent, and that's fine, how much you use it or not. Luck is going to come and go. Some days will be more lucky, some days will be less. And just, it's like weather. This is a nice rainy day, this is a nice sunny day. It is what it is. But persistence, all of you can control that. And that is probably the biggest difference I've seen in people being successful, period, over the years, is persistence. The people that are persistent, they do it. They do it. And that's the thing in your control.
Sydney asked, what would be the average time to make an animated movie? That one I think we covered. It's probably around 4 or 5 years on average.
Yep.
From very beginning of the idea till the end when the final shot is rendered.
And then Morgan asks, how do I animate fast movements? I think fast movements are, as you've seen in the talk, you'll probably have some stretch happening in a faster movement. You'll probably have the timing and spacing spread out, so you're going a longer distance in a shorter amount of time. That'll be a fast movement. And then if you want to get into like some speed lines or anything else, you can. But those are the biggest things, is probably how something stretches, now something moves in the timing and spacing.
Mm-hmm. London asks, what software should I use for a Wacom Interest Pro paper edition? So if you've got a Wacom Interest, I'm not really sure what programs, whatever computer you're plugged into, there's going to be some kind of drawing program, I think, that you can, whether it's a free one online or on an app store perhaps. But if you want to animate, I'm not too up on like the simplest animation apps.
Yeah, because the Wacom is, that's like a keyboard or a mouse or something. It's an input device. It's not the program. So find the program that makes the most sense to you. I totally agree.
Where are we?
Morgan answered for, Morgan, use smear frames. They could convey the illusion of fast movements. I agree.
Yeah. It's like a stretch.
Yes.
Right.
And Nina's asking, how should you make it to the big animation companies? By starting. You can't go anywhere unless you go somewhere, right? You gotta just put a foot in front of the other. That's where you start. Neither of us, we were students. When I was 14 years old, I wrote a letter addressed to the Walt Disney Company, not a person, just the Walt Disney Company, saying, hey, I want to be an animator. What do I do? And yes, it was on paper. It was a paper letter, people. And I got a form letter back that said, if you want to be an animator, go get some training, get some education, and listed some schools and stuff. And that's how I started. And then I was like, you're hungry. You're trying to find all the information you can, any resource you can get. And then you're practicing, and then you're just tenacious. That's how you do it. One step in front of the other.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of people do actually start at small companies first. They might work on commercials first. They might work on visual effects. They might work on children's television programs. So
what was tell them your first, one of your first animation jobs, because I love this.
Oh, I worked in children's television. Well, actually, first thing I worked on was a commercial. And then, which story are you referring to, Bobby?
Well, you were doing your children's television stuff. These were things, like we both worked on, I worked on something called a educational CD-ROM. Mm-hmm. Almost no one has any idea what that is. That was my first, thank you. That was my first time animating. It didn't even make it, wasn't even published, but you got the experience.
Yeah. And I animated a lot of yogurt commercials.
Okay.
So little pots of yogurt, like, bouncing around, but you have to start somewhere, and opportunities will arise, and you take the ones that come your way and keep on improving your craft.
I found the first commercial the first thing I ever animated that went out to the public was a Jell-O commercial. I animated that from my sophomore year of college, 1996.
Jell-O. Imani asks, how many animators does it take to make a movie like Soul? Soul, I think it was around 100. It was probably a little less, and that's a lot, because the amount of time we had to finish it in was quite short, so we had to have more animators. But what we like to do usually is have more time and less animators. So it can depend on how long that runway is. But for Soul, it was between 90 and 100, I think.
I think Jennifer's answering another person's question about using KineMaster, so that's great. Thank you, Jennifer. Sydney's asking, what was your favorite character in your favorite movies you've created? Their favorite character was Incredibles, or movie was Incredibles 2, and their favorite character was Jack Jack. My favorite character to animate is Woody, because he's fairly complex as a character. He's also in the first Toy Story, but I like that he's very thoughtful and earnest, and he wants to be a good person, but he's also jealous, and he pushes Buzz Lightyear out the window. So, like, that's us. We try to be good people that sometimes make bad decisions, and then we do have to go through a whole movie's worth of work to try to make up for those decisions, and I like that part. I mean, that's a very human thing, even if you're not a 12-inch tall toy. Right.
My favorite was Joy, I think, for a similar reason. She thinks she's doing the right thing, but she sometimes gets it wrong, and she's funny and a little bit zany, so she was a fun character to animate. Dimi asks, on average, how many animation movie ideas are formed extensively but end up not being made? That's a good question. We've had, I don't know how many movies that have been in production but didn't actually get formally either announced, or they were announced and then they didn't get made. Do you know how many over the years? Because I can think of a couple, but it does happen.
Yeah, there's a few that have gotten further down the runway, so to speak, the pipeline. There's a lot of ideas that get started and they change a lot, and some make it and some don't, and some come back around. I remember hearing like there's ideas in some of the Toy Story movies that didn't make it into the first one that ended up being great ideas for the fourth one or whatever. Ideas, sometimes we want an idea at a certain time and it's just not the right time for it. And I think movies are the same. So some make it and some just kind of sit in the cupboard until it's time. Okay, Sydney's asking, how long does it take to make one character? So probably as long as it takes to make the movie. I mean, the characters are the movies, right? Are the stories. So it starts in story, it starts with writing, it starts with artwork, then it gets to, building these characters and designing them and models, and then animation, and then it's all put together. So, the characters really take just as long as the films to make.
London asks, how do you keep the same shape of the character? This might be more of a 2D question. Bobby, you might be able to answer that.
So if you're drawing it in 2D, the best way to keep the same shape is practice, to be honest, right? Because it is a skill you work on. It's just like trying to keep a ball the same size. Like try drawing a circle over and over and over and over and over again. Sometimes it's hard, and you don't realize that the circle is shrinking or gaining or getting bigger or whatever. Same with the characters, is practice drawing that over and over. And if it's in the computer, it's a little easier because it's a model. It's like a puppet that we're moving around. But we can still distort it a lot of ways. So it's up to us to practice, and that's our job. So that's what we're working at.
Mm-hmm. And Cambria asks, how do you create good lip sync? That's lip sync is hard because you want it to look real and not over articulated. And sometimes we tend to say the character has to say, hi, my name's Woody. And we're there and we're like, hi, my name is Woody. And if you're trying to animate every single piece of that dialogue and you put it all in there, it's a mushy mess and it looks wrong. So you kind of have to pick out the biggest sounds. So hi is a big one. My name is Woody, and you can have a big ooh on Woody. So trying to pick out the big shapes, I find helps so that I'm not trying to trying to make a shape for every sound.
Yeah,
You
there's
got
a
any
really.
tips?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna ask, have you got any tips?
Oh yeah. So one that I was told by a friend of mine that they do is do the Muppet thing. So, hi, my name is Woody. Hi, my name is Woody. So if you go over and you slow that down, hi, big, my name is Woody, right? So now you're looking at your big and your small shapes. So it's just simply like, hi, biggest shape, hi, my kind of medium shape name is small shapes because it's two words happening close together. Wood, medium shape, D. Hi, my name is Woody, right? And that starts to break it down into a very simple way to go like, oh, those are the big things I should do. And then you can have little shapes on top of that. But that's was a decent starting point.
Mm-hmm. And that goes back to the question about what you can do to help become a good animator. Is, you know, puppetry classes, actually.
For real.
We know someone who makes her own puppets.
There is an animator named Karen Prell who was the puppeteer and the voice of Red Fraggle in a show that was called Fraggle Rock. And she was an animator on A Bug's Life and Toy Story 2 and several of the early films. And I think she's puppeteering again now. But
Oh, cool.
there you go.
Yeah. Cool. Where were we?
London says, thank you. You're welcome, London. Salika says, what are the things to watch out for in the animation industry? I've heard that Ethan Becker talking about his experiences working on the Avatar Netflix live action remake, and he said they made him work extra for the same pay. What are other things to watch out for? I mean, you definitely, if someone asks you to do something for free, you know, it's time out, because the thing is like you're making art, and that's just like you know, picking up a couch and moving it for someone, or for you fixing whatever. It's a job, right? It's a job. And there's value in that. So you doing art for someone, there's a value in that, and know that value. You know, you shouldn't be working extra and not getting paid for that. I mean, that's just what it is. Unless you're doing it just like you're out there doing your own drawings for yourself. But if someone's like, hey, can you make a sign for me? Hey, you can animate this thing, or hey, you can do whatever. Great. It's a job. Treat it like a job.
Sydney asks, do you have to make a model of clay or some other substance in order to see the vision of the character? If you can visualize your character using, you know, just drawing it out, oftentimes we do make a model. We make a clay sculpture so that we can see our character in 3 dimensions. We have a sculptor at Pixar that does that. But otherwise, you know, some people draw with, you know, the outline of the character, and they kind of draw a turntable. So you're seeing the front and the side and the 3/4. So it's not necessary, but if you can visualize it, you know, with your pencil and paper, and then in the computer, if you're doing computer animation, then you get to see it in 3 dimensions. And then the question about lip sync, I hope that we answered that earlier.
London's asking, do you need a visual picture sometimes like you make a clay version of it? Oh, I think we just answered that, I think. Any tips to keep your characters on model? Answered that earlier. Practice, paying attention. Practice. You know, that's design. That's just training your eye, right? If anyone's ever run, right, and that's practice. Like, to be able to run is practice, and then there's form and distance. It takes practice to build endurance. It's the same thing with animation.
How much do you get paid? Well, let's say that, you know, being an animator, you can make, you know, a decent living wage, right? Yeah. And it starts off low when you're just a beginner, and then the more you work and the more different companies you work at, or the more years you have under your belt, and your skills get more refined, then, you know, you get a little bump in salary for that, hopefully. So it's definitely livable.
I would say, you know, my first year in college, I had a design teacher who said this. He said, for all the parents out there, and this is for all the parents listening to this conversation right now, and I've seen a few parents, I think, listening to this. So for all the parents to say there's no future in art and being an artist. He says, unless it's grown or it's dug out of the ground, it's designed. And that's the truth. Everything from the shows you're watching to the pictures on the wall to the chair you're sitting in to the clothes you're wearing to the commercials to everything, it's designed. That's all a world of art, right? You remove art from the world, you're a farmer or a miner. And actually you need a shovel and you need something else that someone had to design in the first place. So, I mean, there's a world of art out there. So if you want to make a living as an artist, you completely can. I will also say right now in these times where we're all working from home and shelter in place, in the entertainment industry, you know which part of the entertainment industry kept working through this whole thing? Animation. We could do this from home. We could do this from anywhere, and we just kept on going.
Mm-hmm. And people are at home so much watching Netflix and Disney Plus and running out of things to watch. So there's plenty of room for more shows to be made. What are new programs that companies are starting to use? Sydney asks. That's a good question. Again, we have our own software at Pixar that some clever people at Pixar made for us. But you know, the main ones that people use in the industry are Maya. And I don't know if there are any newer ones in there. They tend to just be the main Maya 3D Studio Max kind of blender packages. So
yeah, and I think as Lika said, Toon Boom, Flash, Blender, that's some of it. So that's great. And you know, this is a great thing. You know, you all right now are asking us a bunch of questions, but a lot of you are also answering those questions. That's probably each other is probably one of your best resources, period. And not just to answer the questions, but to look at each other's work. Like this is what we do all day long, is we're constantly showing each other things and bouncing ideas off each other, right? None of us are doing this alone. So just ask each other questions. There's this great moment that happened on the first Incredibles, right? So we're in this animation review with Brad Bird, who's the director of The Incredibles, and someone's showing their shot. And no one's commenting and at all. And Brad Bird's this really fiery guy. And he stops the animation playback and he stomps up to the front of the room and he goes, listen, there's not one of you that can solve every problem we're going to face to get this film done. But together, we can solve anything. And everyone's like, oh, all right. It's like, so chime in, talk up. I want to hear from you. And everyone jumped in there and they started talking and giving notes. And that's how we do everything. That's how we do everything. And you all can do the same exact thing, right? You got each other.
Yep. Use each other as resources. That's a very good answer. Mamie asks, how did you guys get your chance to work at Pixar? Did you apply? Were you chosen? For me, I applied. I had made a short film, which again, like we said, was a film that sort of I wanted to make. It was a little bit about my life, and I made it and I put it on a DVD and I sent it to Pixar. And then, you know, I got an interview. So it sounds like it's simple. It was quite hard, but the only way they're going to know about you is if you send in your work and you give them a call and you say, hey, I'd love to work for you one day. So yeah, what about you, Bobby? How did you get your chance to work at Pixar?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I wrote that letter to Disney. Then I ended up going to school. I found a college at the time. This is the early 90s, so it's a while ago, and there weren't as many resources as there are now. So I went to college for animation and I made films. I made short films every year. And Pixar saw my short film, and that's how I got a chance to work on A Bug's Life. And that was also a very different time when there weren't a lot of people willing to take a chance on computer animation. The only computer animated film at the time had been Toy Story. So there were a lot of students like myself at the time that were coming up and working there. So, but you have to make something, like Jude says. You got to make something.
Make something personal to you. And that'll catch people's eye.
Agreed.
Let's do some quick fire questions. Okay, you ready?
All right.
Okay. How long does it take to just animate one scene of a movie or TV show?
3 weeks.
Cool. Okay. What type of classes should middle school and high school students need to start taking in order to get a job in the world of animation?
Oh, am I just answering these? No, you're answering too, right?
Okay. Art.
Oh, okay. You
Design.
ask the question. I'll answer, and then I'll ask.
Okay.
I see how this goes. This is a great
Okay.
game for people.
Okay.
What type of classes should take any drawing class you can, even if you don't think you're an artist, because it's going to work on your observational skills. Take any math or computer class you can, even though you're not into math or computers, because it's going to teach you your technical skills. And then take any acting classes or theater classes or drama classes or anything like that, because it's going to teach your performance skills. And then take any film classes or anything like that you can, because it's going to teach you your visual storytelling skills. Boom.
Good.
All right. Oh, here you go. Jude from London. Do you drink a lot of coffee to stay up, or do you do this?
I do. I love coffee and I drink a lot of it. And I used to stay up late to animate, but now I just get up early. So, and really you want to get a good night's sleep, because after you've been looking at your screen for 8 hours, you get tired. And so you really need to have a life. You got to have a life to be able to animate life. So try and fit your work into the work, and you still have a life in the evenings. Bobby. Does it take multiple people to create one character? Asked Sydney.
Yes, unless you're working on your own personal film where you can do everything yourself. It takes a lot of people. So it's all about collaboration and working with other people. So if you think, I don't like to work with people, I can do myself, that's how it has to change. You have to be able to work with other people. And so it's just collaboration. So yes. All right. Piper asked if animators got paid well. We answered that. Sydney's going to say, who decides what each character looks like in a movie or TV show? Jude.
The art department and the director, generally. They'll work together and try out different styles and ideas, and they'll hone in on their characters' design. LaMarie asked, how long does it take to make an animation? We answered that one.
Nina asked above it, do you have to draw a certain style to get into Pixar Disney?
Me?
Sure, yes.
No, I think that if you have a style, then that makes you even more interesting. And, you don't want to completely copy something else. It's a good place to start, to learn a style and to copy the design sensibilities of others. But if you develop your own style, that makes your work stand out. And I think that you should try to stand out and not do what you think people want to see. Where are we? Okay. DJ and Claire, Charisse, do you work side by side with the voice actors so the animation syncs up?
So the answer is the voices are always recorded first, and then we animate to those voices. So we're not side by side, we're staggered. So they'll record the voices, we'll have that, we'll listen to them. Sometimes we'll even watch the video of the recordings to see if there's any traits or attributes or whatever that's useful to us. But the voices always happen first. All right. From Imani, do you know or work with the person creating the lamp crushing the eye logo? We do. So the one crushing the eye logo was animated for, it came out for A Bug's Life because it was not in front of Toy Story. And it was animated by Pete Docter, who was the supervising animator on the first Toy Story, directed Monsters, Inc., Up, Inside Out, and is the director of Soul. So Pete Docter did that, and we got to work with him for the last several years.
Yeah. In this one, actually, Sydney asked, how long did it take to make Inside Out? I think it was about 5 or 6 years altogether. And then how many people does it take to make a movie? 500 people? I don't know.
I think it tops out about 300, a little over 300 at the peak. 300. Starts at 1, it gets up there, and it drops back down. Sorry, I missed that one. Okay. Melanie said, here you go, Jude. If you are all responsible for animating a specific object or character in a sense, will you get a lot of feedback and help from your fellow animators to make sure the animation looks clean cut in case you may have missed some detail or put too much detail in?
Yeah, definitely. That's how we get better, and that's how we do what we do, because every morning we go to what we call dailies, which is in a screening room, and we put our work on the screen and show each other, and then the director gives us notes and other animators give notes. and with the goal of making, you know, everybody's animation sort of better, and also, like you say, clean cut and putting in details that we might have missed, or taking out details that are too much. So we definitely lean on each other to make our work better.
Agreed.
Sydney asks, how many times have you had an idea for a character but didn't actually get to put it in the movie or TV show?
A lot of times we have a lot of ideas for the characters that we're working on or something else. You know, a lot of them don't make it in, and that's totally fine. You know, but it's more important that we put it out there and we chat with each other and we throw ideas out there, because we're just trying to find the best idea that works. Salika's asking, how do you animate water?
Well, thankfully, in animation, we don't really have to do that. We have a department, simulation department, and they use a lot of math and technical skills to make the water look amazing for us every time. Imani asks, when making the trailer of a movie, do you make it separately or use finished scenes from the movie?
We usually try to use finished scenes from the movie, but sometimes we'll animate some specific shots just for a trailer if the movie's not done yet. So it's a combination of both. Anna, remember the commercial? Love it. All right, Jennifer says, are Disney and Pixar the same thing? Jude?
No, we're very different. We're in different parts of California. So Disney's in Burbank and Pixar's in Northern California. Disney came first, and they did Mickey Mouse and lots of other amazing films you will have seen. And then Pixar started independently as a computer company, and then started doing 3D animation. And then Disney kind of bought Pixar? I don't know. Is that what they did?
They did.
So now we're kind of like Disney's, you know, siblings.
Yes, we're technically, for the adults in the room, a wholly owned subsidiary of the Walt Disney Company. Just like ESPN is a sports station that Disney owns, or ABC is a network that Disney owns. So it's like that.
Yeah. Sydney asked, how many people did it take to make Incredibles 2?
I think we topped out, like you said, 300 to 400, maybe
400. Yeah.
Here you go for Jude. Deanie's asking, on average, how many animation movie ideas are formed extensively but end up not being made?
Oh.
Kind of touched on that a little bit.
Yeah, that one, I mean, we could have done 4 or 5 that didn't get made. I'm not really sure. Good question, though. Yep. Naomi asks, does the movement in Luxo Jr. show how young he is compared to Luxo?
I would say yes. I mean, if you look, you know, if anyone who has seen little kids or younger siblings who have way more energy and you don't understand it, you know, the big lamp moves a little slower, you know, moves like a parent, like see a parent walk in the background there. The kids were running around though and have a lot more energy, and we try to invoke that, even though it's not a person, we try to invoke that in the lamp itself. Let's see. Sydney's asking, how long did it take to create Luxo, and what is your favorite older animation movie, like Snow White, Cinderella, etc.?
Oh, I'm not sure how long it took to make Luxo. Do you know?
No, I think it's about a year-ish or so. Luxo came out in 1986, and Pixar had just been bought by Steve Jobs from George Lucas at the time, so it's probably about a year or so.
Mm-hmm. Favorite old animation movie? I mean, I don't know if it's old enough, but I love Lion King.
That's a good one. I'm going to throw my hat in here. Little Mermaid is one of my favorites. It's the one that made me want to be an animator at 14. Mm-hmm. I'm not ashamed of that. Yeah. All right.
How long does average animated movie take? We answered that one, Eden. And animation, how many, do animators get paid well? We answered that one too. Naomi asks, what's your favorite part of your job, and what's the most challenging thing about your job?
You know, my favorite part of my job is being inspired by all the people I work with, and the most challenging part of my job is feeling depressed that I'm not at the same level of talent as all the people I work with. It's kind of a duality that happens all the time, where you're excited and inspired and you feel like you can't make it, and that's just part of it. And it's just who we are. We're artists, and there's no best artist. That's the thing. It's all subjective. So you just kind of keep trying. So
Maybe also wants to know, did the voice actor sign your picture back there?
Those are all the animators. Those are the animators that worked on Toy Story 2. You know, we have a tradition in the animation department. Actually, we didn't do that on the Bugs Life. I wish we had. but since Toy Story 2, where all the animators we sign each other's posters, and so we, these are the people that we made the movie with. So it's kind of cool.
Can I interject for a second? It's
Yes.
about 1:30. Are you guys good, or you want to start wrapping it up? Because I see a lot of people are leaving.
I have to go in a few minutes because I have to go to another Zoom call for my son's math class. He's 13 and he's trying to take some math classes. So
okay. So can we close out?
Yeah, let's do it.
do you have any questions for us? Do you have anything you want to wrap up with, or?
I'm just sitting here in awe. I think that this was the best thing since sliced bread. This was really good. And what I love about it is that the girls were so engaged, even though this was a lecture. They had tons of questions, which tells me that there is a great interest in this field.
There is. I would, there's one thing.
I honestly, I'm still here.
I'm scanning through some of the questions. I'm sorry. I was scanning through the questions. Someone asked if Pixar offers camps or classes for kids.
Yeah.
There are the Pixar in the Box, which is all available online. And then Jude, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe we've had, it's different with shelter in place out here and what's going on, but we've had Girls Who Code at Pixar doing summer internships, summer work at the studio. And these were these are high school girls, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, for the last couple of years. So we've got some programs that work. I can't tell you more than that. I mean, you would probably be able to contact the people at Pixar to give that information, but there are opportunities.
Okay, so what I will do is to reach back out through your community engagement person. She's so sweet. To see if we can do some other things in the future, because like I said, from today, I can tell that there is a great interest. So I want to make sure that we fulfill those needs so that I know I can see that we have girls who may be interested in going into this field. So I want to make sure, I know you guys, Sharice, hey, make sure that you guys get there and that see what we can do to at least assist. But oh my God, thank you all so much for taking time out on your early Saturday, because I know you guys are a few hours behind us, well, in front of us. So, oh my God, thank you guys so much.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Jude's in England right now, so just for all you. So
it's my evening right now. I'm in the future.
You're where? You in England?
Yeah.
Are you serious?
This is coming internationally at you.
Cool. Oh my God, I had no idea. That is so wonderful.
Well, thank you for having us. Thank you for your great questions as well. We really enjoyed being here and answering your questions.
Well, thank you all so much. Enjoy your Saturday, and we look forward to seeing more work. And then we say, oh yeah, we saw him. Yeah, we're gonna go and look for you now. But thank you so much. We appreciate all the work that you guys are doing for us, because we love your movies.
You're welcome. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, you all have a good one. Bye, ladies. See you all soon.
Bye.